find you, Matty. If it takes the rest of my life, I will find you.
Hi folks, Captain Rutledge here. Last time I did a book versus TV series video about Brian Jacques' Redwall. To follow up, here's a sequel to the original Redwall novel, Mattimeo, A Tale of Redwall. The original novel was published in 1989 and sees Matthias and company searching for the Abbey youths that were kidnapped by slavers led by the cunning fox, Slagar the Cruel. Compared to Jacques' previous Redwall entries, Redwall and Mossflower, Mattimeo goes on a different path than what was written earlier. Redwall was a retelling of the hero's journey. Mossflower, covering Martin the Warrior's founding of Redwall, was another takeoff of Arthurian legend, but Mattimeo, at its core, is a story of a father trying to get back his missing son, a theme that's not often seen in fantasy. The descriptive writing and mouth-watering food are still present, as is plenty of humor and a great variety of riddles. I forgot to mention it in the past episode, but Jacques absolutely loves riddles as much as he loves writing about food. For young readers, it gives them a small puzzle to figure out as the story unravels. More advanced readers might find them a little too easy to crack, but then again, these novels are intended for children aged 8 to 16. Anyhow, as much as Mattimeo is a reunion story, it is also a coming-of-age story. Mattimeo starts out as a spoiled troublemaker, but grows to embody the traits of a true warrior, much like his father and Martin before him. It's an excellent addition to the Redwall saga, and well worth a read if you enjoyed the original Redwall novel. The resulting TV series premiered in 2000. Again, it was produced by Nelvana and Alphanim, with many of the original voice cast reprising their roles from the first season. The animation, though, has suffered a significant downgrade compared to the mediocrity of the first season. Many scenes have key characters omitted, animation errors, but on the whole it's okay. Oh, and I forgot to mention, a few new voice actors have arrived on the scene to offer their takes on these characters. Cornflower, who was voiced by Alison Pill in Season 1, is now voiced by Melissa McIntyre. Arguably, Alison Pill was able to sound more emotionally invested.
Mercy me! The little rogue has escaped!
The main series villain, Slagar, though, is voiced by the one, the only, Tim Curry. He makes the character sound absolutely twisted and demented from years of wandering, but nonetheless a threatening adversary for Matthias and the other Abbey dwellers.
Silence when I speak! How would you know what happened? I was there. I am Chicken Hound. And your father did this to me!
Now it's time to discuss adaptation, starting with what was kept intact from the novel. Unlike last season, the events of Mattimeo are pretty much kept intact from the original novel, and in the original novel's order at that. 8 seasons after the events of Redwall, Matthias and Cornflower's son Mattimeo has become somewhat of a spoiled troublemaker at the Abbey. After getting into a fight with a new Abbey resident named Vitch, Mattimeo gets sent to his father for punishment. Matthias tells Mattimeo that striking out against others is not the way of a warrior, and has Mattimeo do extra chores around the Abbey as punishment. Meanwhile, a fox slaver named Slagar has been terrorizing the countryside around Mossflower Woods, burning homes and taking young creatures hostage to sell as slaves. Vitch, who was acting as Slagar's spy in Redwall, provides intelligence that the Redwallers' defenses will be down for Abbot Mordalphus's Jubilee Feast. Slagar and his slavers disguise themselves as traveling performers and are able to enter the Abbey unopposed. Slagar puts on a mind-reading act while secretly drugging the Redwallers, and while everybody is knocked out, he kidnaps their children, kills Friar Hugo and Mrs. Bankful, and injures John Churchmouse. The Abbey youth wake up to find themselves in chains and Slagar as their captor. They are then forced to march southwards while Slagar's horde make false tracks to throw off any rescue attempts. The Abbey dwellers, meanwhile, come out of their drugged state to find the children missing and form a search party. Matthias, Basil Staghair, and Jess Squirrel come across a slaver's abandoned cart and a young otter named Cheek, who joins in on their quest and provides information as to the slavers' whereabouts. They are later joined by a badger warrior named Orlando the Axe, whose daughter Alma was kidnapped, and Jabez Stump, whose only son was also kidnapped. Meanwhile, Slagar reveals himself to Mattimeo as Chicken Hound, who was presumed dead after coming across Asmodeus, but he used his healing skills to heal the snake's bite, although becoming deranged and scarred during the process. Kidnapping Mattimeo and the other Abbey youth was his method of revenge against Matthias, whom he felt was responsible for his disfigurement. Back at Redwall, the remaining Abbey dwellers ponder how to aid Matthias and the others in their quest. That night, Abbot Mordalphus receives a vision from Martin the Warrior in the form of Riddle. Thanks to baby Rollo Vankful, the Riddle leads the Redwallers to an underground chamber and a statue of Abbess Germaine, the first abbess of Redwall. On the statue, Rollo reveals a set of stone tablets in an old cipher called Loam Script. John Churchmouse, who was taught Loam Script by Brother Methuselah, translates the tablets, revealing a riddle leading to a stone on the Abbey bell tower, providing a rough map and directions to Loam Hedge Abbey, Abbess Germaine's former home. Mattimeo and the other Abbey youngsters discover they're headed to a place called Malcaris and attempt an escape while resting near a river, hiding under the water while using breathing straws. Slagar, unaware, traps Matthias and company in a cave with a rock slide. When Mattimeo and the others try to dig them out, Slagar recaptures them and continues to Malcaris. After Slagar leaves, Logolog and the Gauzim discover Matthias and company and dig them all out from the rock slide. Back at Redwall, Warbeak and her Spira fly off with the directions to Loam Hedge Abbey. In their absence, an army of crows, rooks, and magpies commanded by General Ironbeak fly into Redwall and attempt to take it for themselves. With Matthias, Jess, and Basil away, it's up for the other Redwallers to maintain defenses against Ironbeak and his seer, Mangees. Matthias and company keep a close tail on Slagar's forces, following him up a cliffside with help from a poetic owl named Sir Harry the Muse, passing through a dark forest filled with painted creatures, braving a river filled with sharp-toothed fish, and fighting a horde of camouflaged rats. In the end, they get the directions from the Spira, but Warbeak is killed by one of the camouflaged rats. Back at Redwall, Ironbeak slowly conquers the Abbey, forcing the Redwallers into Cavern Hole and cutting off their supply lines. Ironbeak's seer, Mangees, cannot foretell their future though, since his visions are blocked by Martin the Warrior. Taking advantage of this, Cornflower and Constance go out at night disguised as Martin to frighten Ironbeak's army, but Abbot Mordalphus eventually calls for these charades to stop before somebody gets hurt. One day, a red kite happens on the Abbey doorstep and gets attacked by Ironbeak's crows, but she gets saved by the Redwallers and is nursed back to health. Thanks to the directions to Loam Hedge, Matthias and company continue towards Slagar and the youngsters, crossing a bottomless chasm, reuniting with Sir Harry, and solving riddles in Warbeak's map. One night, though, as Slagar's camp, an army of short rats in black cloaks approach Mattimeo and the other slaves, knocking them out with a strong potion and taking them to the underground kingdom of Malcaris, filled with other slaves building a city for a large polecat statue. When Slagar's slave drivers wake up, they believe themselves double-crossed and try to knock off each other, but Matthias and company put a stop to their fighting and continue to the site where Loam Hedge Abbey used to stand, since converted into the underground kingdom of Malcaris. In return for his services to the underground city, Slagar is promised a portion of land and servants to command, but the discovery of Matthias and company in Malcaris sends out an alarm throughout the underground. Matthias then battles a huge creature called the Werit, but during the battle, he falls into a deep chasm. There he meets the real Malcaris, a deformed polecat who tries to kill him, but instead, Malcaris gets stoned to death by some of his own slaves. Matthias sets to work freeing the slaves, and his friends valiantly battle against Malcaris' hordes. Logolog gets mortally wounded during the battle, though, and is carried out by the Gauzim. As they move to the upper ground, Logolog chooses a shrew named Flug as his successor. He overhears Mattimeo and the others locked in a cell, and gets to see Mattimeo one last time before he dies. Mattimeo and his friends are reunited with Matthias and company as they battle Slagar and the rats of Malcaris. Back at Redwall, Ironbeak successfully locks Constance away in the Abbey gatehouse and takes the Redwallers prisoner. Before he can start executing them, though, the red kite slays him in a fit of rage. Constance soon escapes the gatehouse and takes out Mangees. With both Ironbeak and Mangees gone, the remaining crows, rooks, and magpies are forced out of Redwall, never to return again. Matthias, Orlando, and Slagar battle underground, but the city of Malkaris begins to quake. Slagar escapes as Matthias and Orlando endeavor to get everybody out in time. Slagar, having escaped, murders young Vitch in a fit of rage, but he gets chased away by both Matthias and Orlando. He loses his footing and then falls to his death. With everyone freed, Matthias, Mattimeo, and everybody else return home to Redwall, where Mattimeo becomes the new Abbey warrior, and Orlando, Cheek, Jabez, and the others make their new home in the Abbey. Multiple lines of dialogue from the book are adapted verbatim to the series, from Baby Rollo's little songs to Sir Harry's odd poetry, and very little is added or detracted from the original novel. A few absent characters from the first series, like Ambrose Spike and Mr. and Mrs. Churchmouse, are given their full roles from the novel, and even the tiniest details like Slagar's Harlequin mask and Jabez Stump's unruly family have made it in. However, there were still a few changes for adaptation's sake. Many changes from the novel are relatively minor, say one character doing an action or saying a line that a different character did or said in the novel. However, we must remember that the previous season, Redwall, had drastic changes from the original novel, and so a few sins of the father were carried over to Mattimeo. For instance, in the novel, when Slagar tells his life story to Mattimeo, in the TV series, his second-in-command 3 clause is present for the whole tale, and Slagar reveals that he was Chickenhound, and takes off his mask to reveal his damaged face. The novel told his story differently. Slagar started by removing his mask, telling just Mattimeo that the Redwallers betrayed both him and his mother to Clooney the Scourge, how he was wounded and escaped to Redwall where he was kept as a prisoner, but he escaped, was bit by a serpent and only survived through his knowledge of herbal remedies. Ever since his fate, he always had a taste of revenge against Redwall and taunted Mattimeo by having him ask Sam Squirrel about the son of Sella. It was Sam, who was still young at the time of these events, that revealed Slagar to be Chickenhound, and cleared up a few falsehoods and inaccuracies in the Fox's narrative. The painted ones in the TV series appear to be some sort of lemur. In the novel series, though, they are a tribe of feral, cannibalistic rats. In the novel, Sister May had a much larger role, as she helped care for baby Rollo and was able to heal Strike Red Kite's bad wing and nurse her back to health. The TV series has most of her exploits taken by Cornflower and Mrs. Churchmouse. On the subject of the Churchmouse family, their daughter Tess eventually marries Mattimeo. Keep in mind that at the end of the first season of Redwall, John Churchmouse was made Cornflower's father instead of Mr. Fieldmouse. Ergo, Mattimeo is Tess's nephew, and all sorts of EWE incest, and you get King Charles II of Spain. However, in this series, Cornflower rarely refers to either Mr. or Mrs. Churchmouse as mother or father. Instead, she refers to them as either John or Mrs. Churchmouse. Perhaps the screenwriters saw their grave mistake. We'll never know. The final fights at both Redwall and Malkaris have a few slight differences compared to the novel. In the novel, when Strike Red Kite lashed out against General Ironbeak for planning to harm Sister May, there wasn't a great aerial battle like in the novel. Rather, she just tore him to shreds inside the Abbey halls. During the Malkaris battle, Slagar didn't just sit around in the open and watch. Rather, he concealed himself to avoid the battle and sneaked out of the city well before the pit caved in. In the final confrontation with Matthias and Orlando, both were taken by the Blood Wrath and charged at Slagar without mercy, leading to his death from falling down a well. The TV series has Slagar putting up more of a fight. What's the Blood Wrath, you ask? In the world of Redwall, the Blood Wrath is a mental condition that causes creatures to go berserk with rage and cause great damage to themselves and their surroundings. In the books, it's almost impossible to control. It mostly happens with badgers like Orlando and Constance, but it can also occur in mice and hares. What's more, the novel sees a bit of time lapse between General Ironbeak's forces departing Redwall and Matthias's return to the Abbey, whereas the TV series confusingly has them occur about the same time, as if they all discovered a teleport on their way back to Redwall. On the whole, not as many adaptation changes as the last season, but there were still a few tidbits left out in the final product. Many prominent characters from the novel have had their roles trimmed down significantly. Jabez Stump and his son Jube, Tim Churchmouse, Sister May, Flug and Winifred, and several others were omitted completely, like brothers Trug, Dan, Rufus and Sedge, sisters Agnes, Fern, Garnet Hartwood and Rose, and Mrs. Fieldmouse. More major characters inherited their roles, like Ambrose Spike and Fourmole. During the chasm sequence in the novel, Slagar's horde are frightened of crossing the bridge across the gorge. To get them to cross over, though, Slagar collects all of the water canteens and tosses them down the gorge, forcing them to either cross the bridge to an oasis on the other side, or stay on their side and die of thirst in the hot sun. After the Abbey Dwellers' victory over Ironbeak's forces, the remaining birds of his horde were forced to wear uncomfortable collars around their necks, which reminded them to never return to Redwall again. So, final thoughts? Adaptation-wise, this isn't too bad. It's not perfect either, though. Several character roles are unceremoniously relegated to other characters, making the former almost useless to the plot, and a few changes and omissions are somewhat of a detriment to the story as a whole. Still, the novel chronology is intact, and many of the characters keep their novel bases, so not too bad. Not good, but not bad. Who knows? There might just be better things in store for Redwall's series around the corner. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed this little comparison. If you have, feel free to like, subscribe, and share. And also, leave a comment below. Till next time, I'm Captain Rutledge. Good day.
The door of our abbey is always open to any traveler roaming the dusty path between the woodlands and the plains. So please, be sure to visit us if ever you are passing Redwall.